LiberalViewer presents.
So last week, the Obama administration proposed an even bigger exception to the requirement in Obamacare that employee health plans include free birth control along with other kinds of preventative care. The exception is for religious institutions who claim they have a First Amendment right to decide if their employees' health insurance plans can even cover contraception at all. And as I showed in my video last February, even the Obama administration's original exception for religious employers was most likely constitutional, and this broader exception for even just religiously affiliated institutions like hospitals and colleges is even more likely constitutional, so hopefully social conservatives will accept it. Economic conservatives, on the other hand, still misunderstand the cost issues, as represented by the argument of Karl Rove last week on Fox News' On the Record with Greta Van Susteren, where both Karl Rove and his Fox News host seemed unable to wrap their free market dogma around the idea that providing free preventative care like birth control ends up saving money, even misleading their viewers into thinking they will be paying higher costs, as you can see here.
Women who work at these religious institutions who want contraception, they can get a separate insurance policy to cover the contraception. However, and they don't have to pay for it. They don't have to pay for it, and neither do their employers. Well, somebody's got to pay for it, and the way at least it looks like is that the Obama administration thinks sort of the largesse of the insurance industry that they will pick up the freight. But somebody's picking up the freight.
Well, let's be honest about it. We all are. We're socializing the cost of this insurance by saying insurance companies have to provide it. They're not going to provide it free. They're going to charge all the other people in their customer base for it. So this is a way to take the cost associated with something that's popular, contraception, particularly for younger women, and have somebody else pick up the tab. And in our society, we ought to emphasize personal responsibility. If you want it, you can have it. You have to pay for it, and it's your responsibility.
Only someone as twisted as Karl Rove could somehow find that those trying to prevent unplanned pregnancies are the ones against personal responsibility, but Karl Rove's misunderstanding of the savings from free contraception sounded really familiar to me because the day after I made my video last February on this issue, my right-wing polypop colleague Lee Doran uploaded a video to his How the World Works channel, also making the mistaken argument that free birth control increases the cost of health insurance, as you can see in this clip.
There's no reason to force any insurance company, any at all, forget about religious reasons, to basically mandate that the insurance companies pay for individuals' contraception. Now, I know many of you people are saying, well, what about stuff like birth control or the pill? Look, some insurance companies do pay for that, but it's about the issue is who's going to decide? Is the government going to force an employer to maybe buy more expensive health insurance, or the health insurance is going to have to cover the cost, so they're going to have to pay more? It doesn't make any sense.
And that doesn't make any sense, which I tried to point out to Lee with several comments posted to his video at the time, but I don't think Lee ever fully accepted the power of free birth control to save money, and he kept bringing up this free market dogma about wanting women to be forced to choose the cheapest birth control, which in this case gets the incentives all backwards when more expensive, more effective contraception actually saves money in the long run. And on that last point, a great study came out at the end of last year from one of my alma maters, Washington University in St. Louis, as part of the Contraceptive Choice Project, fighting the high costs of unplanned pregnancies described in their YouTube video like this.
Unintended pregnancy has national consequences. Half of all pregnancies in the United States are unplanned. That's 3 million unplanned pregnancies a year. And U.S. taxpayers currently pay $11 billion annually to cover unplanned births. But not all unplanned pregnancies are followed by birth. More than 40% end in abortion. That equals 1.2 million abortions in the United States every year.
So 3 million unplanned pregnancies a year, costing $11 billion a year, and leading to over 1 million abortions a year means that better access to birth control could potentially lead to huge savings, especially when women have free access to long-acting reversible contraceptives, or LARCs, like IUDs and implantable hormones, which have much lower failure rates because they remove the human error from having to take a pill every day or put on a condom every time. The data showed that providing free access to all forms of birth controls, including LARCs, led to impressive savings, as you can see in this clip.
The Contraceptive Choice Project in St. Louis provided 9,256 female participants with education and access to all birth control methods at no cost. Without knowledge or cost barriers, 75% of choice participants chose LARC methods. And because the majority of women in choice use the most effective methods, their unplanned pregnancy rate was only 35 per 1,000 women. Compare that to the national rate of 52 per 1,000 women. And remember those 1.2 million abortions? That's the same as the national rate of 20 per 1,000 women. Choice participants had an abortion rate of only 6 per 1,000 women. If women nationwide had access to LARC methods, we could potentially prevent up to 1,060,370 unplanned pregnancies and 873,250 abortions every year.
Wow, that's a huge savings, both in terms of billions of dollars and the ability of women to control their futures, but it requires that women not have incentives to buy the cheapest kinds of birth control instead of the most effective kinds, because these LARC methods require a visit with a doctor and several $100s of upfront costs to achieve the huge long-term savings and lower health insurance premiums. But even armed with all this recent evidence, I was still unable to persuade Lee Doran that his free market dogma doesn't apply to money-saving preventative care like birth control, with Lee referring me to a Wall Street Journal article by conservative economist John Cochrane based on the same false premises like, quote, every increase in coverage means an increase in premiums, unquote. Somehow these free marketeers are blinded to the limits of capitalism, like the way short-term market forces can act on individuals to cause huge long-term societal costs, and that's just what former Vice President Al Gore was talking about in a recent interview on The Daily Show, explaining both the strengths and the weaknesses of capitalism in this clip.
The alternatives to capitalism also have been found wanting. Capitalism, of course, we all know it allocates resources efficiently, balances supply and demand, more conducive with higher levels of freedom, and it unlocks a higher fraction of the human potential. But in spite of that, it is now associated with market disruptions that are bigger and more frequent, with short-term decisions that really hurt the economy, with the mismeasurement of value, misalignment of incentives.
And that's all true. Despite the strengths of capitalism, short-term incentives don't always match up with the lowest long-term costs, whether it's choosing cheap fossil fuels without including the higher costs of global warming, or choosing cheap birth control without including the billions spent on unintended pregnancies. But conservatives like Lee Doran and Karl Rove seem unable to see this truth through their free market dogma, even though it's as simple and as common sense as that old quote from Benjamin Franklin that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, I think. But I want to know what you think. Does the evidence show that providing free access to birth control ends up raising healthcare costs or lowering them? And on the bigger question, does the free market faith of economic conservatives prevent them from accepting all the evidence showing capitalism has limits as well as strengths?
YouTube, you decide.